Shane Black from Hook'emHeadlines.com. We're coming back at y'all today with kind of like a pre-game week video. We're taking a look at the projected two-deep depth chart for Texas heading into the season. We just wrapped up training camp. This Saturday is going to be like an install walkthrough practice. By my understanding, the depth chart should be coming out sometime early next week. Granted, you know, Sark, like, especially if there's like any mystery behind it, you know, whatever that be, he likes to save the depth chart sometimes and literally release it like right before game time. But for the season opener against Rice, I don't think that that's going to be a huge deal. Week 2 Alabama is going to be a different story, but week 1, I think we can get the depth chart around Monday or Tuesday. So we can take a look at what that's going to look like. And, you know, we have some pretty good insight, a good idea of what that will look like given how the distribution of practice reps and scrimmage reps took place the last 2 weekends. You know, I think in most positions we know who the starter is going to be or what the rotation is going to look like. You know, I think before we jump in, though, I think it's good. I think it's interesting conversation what positions might still be up in the air. If we can go ahead and highlight that really quickly. For me, will linebacker, I think David Benda will be the starter heading into the season, but I think you could still see some rotation there. And then I would, after that, field corner.
I was going to say field corner.
I think Manny Muhammad is just making a really compelling case there. But, you know, DJ Campbell, I think, is the day one starter at right guard. I feel very confident about that. And I think Jonathan Brooks is RB1. And so I think that covers most of the position battles we had heading into camp. Jake Majors, center, definitely locked that down. Do you have any other ones you would pinpoint?
Not specifically. And I think speaking to the ones that you just went through, I think it's a great sign that, you know, we don't have a ton to talk about in regard to position battle this close to the season. That means people have stepped up in fall camp.
All right, let's go ahead and start at field receiver. So Xavier Worthy, I think, is the starter there. Backing him up has been Isaiah Nayor through a lot of fall camp, and then a mixture with Jonte Cook. So I'm going to say a 2A, 2B situation there. I mean, if I'm saying confidence ratings, I think this is the closest to A+ that you get on the roster. You know, I think for what this means for Texas, that Isaiah Nayor is getting reps at field receiver. You know, I did an article at the site, like doing a whole deep dive into how Texas can weaponize Nayor away from the boundary, or at least just lining him up out of the field receiver spot. And I think the whole point is that another good piece someone did, Eric Henry from Horns 24/7, he did a piece saying how the key to unlocking Xavier Worthy this year is going to be utilizing him in more like short and intermediate passing situations along the screen game, motioning him around that stuff. So you can move Nayor around a little bit, but get him down the seams, some like deep crossing patterns, some fade stuff. Like, I mean, the guy can work between the numbers. He's also a zone buster. I think it's underrated when you're talking about receivers that size, being able to find some of the soft spots in the zone. One of the things I found, he led it was all G5 receivers in zone or in receiving touchdowns against zone defense in 2021. So sorry, I am just doing a whole big spiel on this, but I just think it's interesting how many weapons Texas has here, how many different ways they can utilize all of these guys. And, you know, I think for Nayor, you know, being able to still stretch the field, give Ewers another big receiver to look to, someone else to find down the seams, someone that can find the soft spots in zone defense. That's huge. Worthy, again, I think he won't be utilized as much over the top this year, but in every other way, I think I ran a stat yesterday for Worthy in what SIS Data Hub I coined this as the core short routes. There's 5 of them. It's like slant, fade, comeback, things like that. He led all Power 5 receivers in yards per route run last season, and led all Big 12 receivers in points earned per route. So he just screams efficiency. He is a technical maestro when it comes to working the short and intermediate parts of the field. Let him go to work there. Jonte Cook's going to be a similar thing, I think. Once Worthy's done after this year, he's going to get the torch passed. So I'll digress because I just did a 4-minute spiel on that. What are you thinking for a field receiver?
Yeah, so those stats on Worthy are pretty eye opening because, to the casual fan, he just seems like to take the top off the defense kind of guy. And this is one of those things that, come next April when draft pundits and people on Twitter are talking about Worthy, they're going to be talking about him as like an over the top B2D kind of guy. But if you do really look at it, he works well short and intermediate. And I think that's going to be crucial this year. I mean, he doesn't need to be that, flying down the field guy with the versatility and depth that this wide receiver room has. Specifically at field, it's going to be Xavier Worthy starting. And, like you said, right now, Naylor and Cook kind of running 2A and 2B. So that's a clear A plus for me because those are three of your top 5 receivers. I think the versatility of this group in general is so great. And, obviously for this exercise, we're going to go, field boundary slot, but to put any of these receivers in a box, would be doing them a disservice. Obviously, you talked about the ability to use Isaiah Neor from different positions. Worthy had a long touchdown in the scrimmage from the boundary. So Sark being able to mix and match where these guys line up and just getting his best players on the field at all times is going to be huge this fall, and I think he's going to do a good job of doing that. But looking at those 3 at field, there are no issues at all, and it's definitely one of, if not the deepest group on the roster.
Without a doubt. So boundary receiver, starter A.D. Mitchell. Backing him up is going to be Casey Kane. I think Isaiah Neyor. If something were to happen to A.D. Mitchell, I think Isaiah Neyor would then be the starter at boundary. But for all intents and purposes, the second team reps at boundary have been going to Casey Kane, and I think he's probably going to be the backup boundary receiver. It might be an or situation on the depth chart next week with him and Nayor. It sounds like Kane's had a good camp. He's gotten bigger. He showed something down the stretch last season. He's just in the mix in such a deep receiving core right now that it's easy to forget about him. But I think against a team like Rice, a team like Wyoming, he can still get some good reps in. But A.D. Mitchell, he's the guy here. We've talked about him a lot this offseason. He's had a fantastic camp. He's got a great connection with Quinn Ewers, multiple touchdown catches the last 2 fall scrimmages, last 2 weekends. And if he can stay healthy this fall, I think he can be a 1,000-yard receiver. I'll go ahead and say that. Slot receiver, Jordan Whittington's the starter. Backup, DeAndre Moore, more than likely. Ryan Niblett, I think, can play a role here. I think he's surpassed expectations since arriving on campus, shown better hands than as advertised. I think his ability as a before the catch receiver is better than a lot of people thought when he arrived on campus. His route runnings looked, by my understanding, pretty good as well. So that's a name to keep an eye on. But yeah, Jordan Whittington, your guy, obviously, good blocker, great route runner, and just a great overall receiver between the numbers. Slot is his natural position, even though he didn't play there a ton last season. I think just with the injury to Nayor, Texas moved him around a little bit more. But yeah, and then DeAndre Moore, not a guy we've talked about a ton this fall or so far in fall camp, but a name we mentioned a lot during the spring. I think he's still going to be a contributor this fall, especially someone that can get into games. Again, the Rice game, the Wyoming game, if we're up by a few scores late in a Big 12 game, someone that we'll see reps there as well.
Yeah, I think the slot position is kind of the ideal formation of a depth chart. You have your 5th-year guy, security blanket, and Jay Witt, and then behind him, you have 2 very talented freshmen who are going to be competing for, those backup snaps. And we know Sark really likes to run with the 3 or 4 receivers that he has the most confidence in. So whoever is that backup still probably won't get a ton of time, but it'll be a battle between Moore and Niblett week in and week out throughout practice. Obviously, Moore kind of has the advantage right now. He was here all of spring. Niblett wasn't. But I think both have really strong futures, and by all accounts, Niblett has had a great fall camp. So I also think, Jordan Whittington should not go underappreciated. Like you mentioned, the blocking that he brings to the table. And just with all the hype around AD Mitchell, Xavier Worthy, Nayor. I think Whittington is just poised for another 50-plus catch season, and he's going to be a third down target and a guy that Quinn can rely on in the middle of the field. So I think, pretty underrated to bring Jay Witt back for a fifth year, and I think he's going to be a really key piece.
Let's go to tight end, and then we'll cover the offensive line. Tight end's pretty clear. JT Sanders, Gunnar Helm. They're going to be on the field together. I don't think a lot this year, but some. I don't think that Texas is going to be running as much as many two tight end sets as they did last season. Just because of the extra weapons that they have at wide receiver. Tight end, I'm going to give it a B because I think Helm's solid. I almost don't think I gave it enough credence how good of a blocker he is. I posted a stat on the site the other day that he was the only, I don't remember if it was Big 12 or the entire Power 5, but he was the only tight end in zone blocking that on more than 100 snaps, may I add, that didn't have a single blown block. Very Simon sound. Yes, he's a limited threat in the passing game, but I don't think Texas really needs him to be a huge threat there. Maybe someone that can just get out to the flats. He's still able to do that. So he still at least, can give you a short gain or, key third down pickup if you need to get someone open. And JT Sanders, someone that is a good blocker, not a great one, I don't think. But I think he's getting there. And I think someone that, while he might not get as many primary targets as he did last season just out of necessity, I think that he could get involved in more explosive plays because he's not going to be, he's not going to always have one or two guys just draped on him, fully devoted to him, just because opposing defensive coordinators have to worry about all the other weapons that Texas has in the mix. So I think from the perspective of extra space to operate, I think JT Sanders could have a lot more efficient season than he did last year and take a lot fewer hits. That's for sure.
Yeah, I'm going to go B+ at the position just because of what JT Sanders brings. One of the top, coming into the season, one of the top 3 to 5 tight ends in the country. Obviously, you got that guy at Georgia, Brock Bowers, but, behind him, Sanders has a chance to be an All-American. And I think, having that, even if the depth isn't great, can cover some of those holes. Looking at it on paper, and I like Gunnar Helm as well, especially in the role that he provides, I feel very comfortable in 12 personnel. If Sanders and Helm stay healthy all year, I'm totally fine. I'm more than happy with what we have at tight end. It's if, those natural bumps and bruises and, miss a half here, miss a game there, come with the tight end position. It's where it gets a little more iffy. You got Juan Davis and then 2 true freshmen with Spencer Shannon and Will Randall who might not even be ready to play. So the depth is a little shaky, but the 2 at the top I'm very confident in. That's why I'll go with a B+ grade there.
All right, left tackle. We said grades. Left tackle. Starter is obviously solidified with Kelvin Banks. Backing him up is probably going to be Peyton Kirkland, but there's room for movement there for sure. I think there's a little bit of conjecture because, Andre Kojo saw second-team snaps there. Cam Williams saw second-team snaps there. Trevor Gooseby even saw second-team snaps at one point. I think from a size perspective, Gooseby's not quite there yet. I think he's still at 285, 290 pounds. I think they want him up 300 or north of. Kojo is obviously there size-wise. He's 6'6", 345. Or do you have Gooseby's weight or?
Yeah, Gooseby's listed at 285 still. So
85. Okay.
Yeah, and Kojo's listed at 355. So
355. I knew it was 345 when he arrived on campus. Okay. So yeah, I think Kirkland is probably your best bet to be the week 1 backup just because he took the bulk of those second team reps. And I think from a physical standpoint, he's probably the most ready to go. He's got that I think he's got that combination of agility, foot speed, natural pass blocking ability, and just overall size that if, he needs to get called into action, that he'll be ready to go and that he can hold his own. Because all these guys are true freshmen, and it's, you're just really picking from a group of unproven players. A lot of, especially in Goosby's case, that aren't physically ready to go yet.
Yeah. So what are you thinking for a grade on left tackle? I'm curious what you go with here.
Because I still feel semi-confident. Because here's the thing. In a realistic scenario, if Banks goes down, Cam Williams is coming over to play to get reps there. So I'm just looking at how the depth chart is probably going to look week one and just try to go solely off that for this position group. But, the reality of the situation is that, like if A.D. Mitchell were to go down at boundary, they have Isaiah Nayor to bring over and start. Cam Williams, I think he is ready to take starting reps. I think he's there. It's just, I think Christian Jones and Kelvin Banks are so good that he is the third guy in line right now. For that reason, I'll give it an A-. Kelvin Banks is, I think, going to be an All-American this year. Ran a stat the other day. He is the only true freshman offensive tackle in the Power 5 since 2016 to go a single season without more than 3 blown blocks. That's spectacular. You just don't see this.
It's ridiculous. It's
like a beta player. What would be your grade for that or confidence?
I'd go A. Splitting hairs with you, but
okay.
Just Kelvin Banks gives you so much confidence. So
yeah, very true. Left guard. I think left guard, you know what? I mentioned this at the outset of the video. Left guard actually does have some uncertainty to it. So, Hayden Connor is, I think, probably going to be the starter heading into week one, but Neto's been pushing him a little bit. I ultimately think that while Hayden Connor's probably the sure bet to be the week one starter there, he just has more experience. I think if Neto were to be the week one starter, he would have been, the first team left guard for at least one of the last 2 scrimmages. He's been rotating in, but, outside of taking rotational reps, and he's been getting the bulk of second team reps at left guard throughout fall camp. I think he's someone to watch. He could still push for that job throughout the season, but it's probably Hayden Connor's to lose still. Neto, I think digesting the offensive concepts, the blocking schemes, and really finding chemistry with the rest of the offensive line, kind of some of the issues we saw with DJ Campbell last season, I think could be something that would plague Neto this fall were he to get starting reps. But, I said this about DJ Campbell last year. Once he got settled in, he was really effective, very imposing, and performed very well. It's just you had those hiccups, especially early in games or early when he went into games, that would cause a sack here or run stuff there. So I think that would be part of the growing pains with Neto. Okay, let's move on. So we're in agreement Hayden Connor's probably the starter, but could still be a question mark there. Okay. What's your grade for that position?
I would go B-, just because I have confidence in both Hayden Connor and Neto, but I don't think either of them, at least in 2023, are bringing any sort of like all Big 12 level to the offensive line. I think there's certainly going to be some struggles with whomever earns that starting role.
I would agree with that. Okay, center. This should be pretty quick. Jake Majors, he is going to be the starter. Yes, he's had his struggles in the last 2 years, but I think he's been good enough. And just his experience, his leadership, he's got good chemistry with these guys, with Quinn Ewers. I think that goes a long way. Connor Robertson is probably going to be listed as the backup, but Cole Hudson, I think for all intents and purposes, were something to happen to Jake Majors, I think you're going to see Cole Hudson coming on the field to be the center.
I'll just say this, good for Jake Majors. I mean, we've had a lot of discussion on this show about who the starting center should be. We've been had some praise for Majors and he said some things that he definitely needs to improve on. But good for him. Just it seems day in and day out, like you said, he carries himself well. He has good rapport with the team, and he earned the job. Fair and square. Although he might not be the ideal center in a Kyle Flood offense, I think he's the best center option for this Texas team, and I think he can, play the role very well. And I feel confident with Jake Majors starting the year at center.
Okay, I'll give center a B. Yeah, I think that's fair. Okay, right guard. We've talked about DJ Campbell a good bit already. I think he's going to be the starter at right guard. He's been taking the first team reps in the last 2 or 3 weeks of training camp. About the last 2 weeks of training camp. Cole Hudson going to be the backup there. Cole Hudson, if someone is going to get nicked up at some point during the season, more than likely. Texas had a lot of health, a lot of health along the offensive line last fall. Really until until Hudson got banged up late in the season, and so having that versatility there, that experience, I think is going to be huge. But I do think it's going to be Campbell week 1, Hudson backing him up.
Completely agree, and I mean Campbell won the job, fair and square. Dealt with some injuries in the spring and just kind of kept plugging along. And we mentioned all offseason that it's tough to unseat a true freshman that played all 12 games last year, or 13 or whatever it was. But I mean, Campbell did it, and I think he gives you the higher upside at the right guard position. I think Hudson's a perfect backup and gives me the most confidence at any position on this offensive line, whereas if the starter went down, we're still going to get very quality production from the backup. So I would throw an A- on this position. I think it easily could become one of the best on the team midway through the year if DJ Campbell is as good as advertised and as good as the recruiting services said.
Okay, right tackle. I think this one's pretty straightforward too. Christian Jones, starter. Cam Williams backup. You got a ton of experience at right tackle. Christian Jones, 6-year senior. Then I think Cam Williams mentioned it earlier. I think he's someone that is ready for starting reps. He can be slotted in either tackle position. Right guard, I meant to mention. I would give that one a B+ as a grade. I think for right tackle, I would give that an A. Just looking at that specific position, I think it's really solid with Jones and Williams.
Yeah, I agree. I would go A as well. I have all the confidence in the world in Christian Jones, and that's one of the guys that Texas can point towards when recruiting 3 stars, saying we can develop you if you stay on campus. He's a perfect example, and Cam Williams is one of the better backups on the team, regardless of unit. So I'm confident in both those guys.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so that about does it for the offensive line. Let's do running back now. So I think Jonathan Brooks is your RB1 heading into the season. I think CJ Baxter is RB2. He's been taking most of the second team reps. But you also have to talk about Thielen Robinson. I think he's in line to get a heavy helping of reps. Probably a similar role to last season where, he's still a guy that can, get some draw plays, get some zone runs out of the backfield, but mainly that's motioned out. You can use him in the screen passing game. You can run routes too, but also a special teams gunner, that's for sure. He's huge in special teams. But Jonathan Brooks, CJ Baxter, I think that's your duo. That's your duo heading into the season. Baxter's come on strong this last week or two in camp, and Brooks, I think it's just another offseason improvement for him. He looked solid in spurts the last 2 years. I feel confident in the RB room, but we lost Bijan Robinson and Rashawn Johnson. It's hard to say this, but I don't know how much credence people are paying to this or paying these losses. These guys are going to have to step up. Texas has the talent to get it done out of the backfield this year. I think Jonathan Brooks can be a 1,000-yard rusher. My main question is, how much does CJ Baxter eat into those reps as the season progresses? That's the big question there.
Yeah, I was actually just going to pose basically that question to you. So looking at it last season, the way the offensive snaps were split, pretty much 60% for Bijan, 30% for Roshan, 10% for Keelan. Do you think that's going to be like just fall right in line, 60% Brooks, 30% Baxter, 10% Keelan, or what is kind of your read on how that's going to go, especially early in the season?
Early in the season, I think the good thing, this hasn't been mentioned enough, CJ Baxter has done a pretty good job hanging on to the football in camp this offseason in team drills and scrimmage settings. That is good for a true freshman. I think that means in bigger games that the coaching staff is going to trust him a little bit more against your Alabamas, your Baylors, your Kansases, some of those September, early October games, OU as well. Jonathan Brooks, I think you saw what he's done to like Rice and Louisiana and teams like that the last 2 years, or Louisiana, Monroe, Kansas, teams like that. He's going to go off early in the season. So I think he's going to get his, Lord knows if he has a game like he did Kansas, where what did he rush for, like 11 carries? What was it, like 121 yards or something like that?
Yeah, it was absurd.
Yeah, so I think if he has a game like that, who knows? But, Brooks, I think, is probably going to get 50% of, I think he'll get 50% of the carries. I think Baxter is going to get 30, and I think the rest of that 20% is going to go between Savion Red, or not Savion Red. I think he could get some reps. Jaden Blue and Keelan Robinson. I'll give the backfield a B+, because I think the depth here is really solid, and I think there's a lot of versatile guys here. But you lost Bijan and Rashawn. It's hard to be an A without them in the mix.
I completely agree. I'll go B+ as well, with obviously the ceiling to be an A, because the talent is there. We just really haven't seen it. Obviously, spurts here and there from Jonathan Brooks, and Keelan Robinson is who he is. That's kind of that gadget guy. Keelan Robinson, excuse me. But yeah, we just don't have the proven production here. So I'll go B+ as well.
Think about it, next year, though, we could have another season, or, Jonathan Brooks is like a season starter then, and then, CJ Baxter heading into a sophomore year, and then you got Jarrett Gibson coming in, looking as good as he has for IMG. And Christian Clark, I think he's going to be really good. So I think next year is really when the RB room's going to hit its stride in, in the Sark and Tashard Choice recruiting era. Okay, what did you give? You gave RB room a B+, right?
B+ as well, yep.
Okay. Quarterback. I think we can keep this one pretty short and sweet. Quinn Ewers, actually, no, we can't, because we got the backup thing to talk about. Quinn Ewers is the starter. He is the X factor for this season. I rewatched his every single snap he took against Washington. I feel pretty good about the direction of his game, even going back to last season. When you compound that with all the important stuff that's happened this offseason, him becoming a more important leader, or like a more integral leader, him taking control of the offense, him just looking more consistent, composed, fundamentally sound. And, it's hard to say fundamentally sound because, you're not getting pressure in your face. It's just simulated pressure. But definitely more composed. He's got a better handle on the offense is the biggest thing. He's taking more accountability. Backup is still up in the air between Malik and Arch. I think it's trending toward Arch right now. Here's my thing: is Malik still? It seems like Malik is still in the era, or is still in the space where he's still a little up and down, still trying to get his footing in this offense. You still see the talent, you see what he can do, but Arch, it seems like he's figuring things out pretty fast. Some of the plays we're hearing him make are plays that you don't see a true freshman make.
So
in the scrimmages, and so I'm going to give the slight edge to Arch, but it's still going to be a back and forth thing.
So my thing on the backup quarterback, I mean, completely echo everything you said about Quinn. I don't think anything more has to be said there. But in regard to the backup, I think ideally, I mean, obviously both guys are going to play against Rice, and someone's got to come in first. You know, someone has to come in right after Ewers. So we will see the pecking order
That is going to be one of the most anticipated moments of the Rice game.
I know it's crazy to think about, and I think ideally for Sark that wouldn't happen because for him, Ewers stays healthy all year, and there's just that between Murphy and Manning, and they don't play.
Probably going to be the case. Actually, I don't doubt that it's Murphy just from a seniority perspective that is listed at number 2. That's why I didn't mention the or thing, because I think Arch is ultimately going to be the backup this season for most of it, just by the way things are trending right now. But that could change. That could definitely change.